Hello, and welcome to our first flipped classroom session. I'm sorry you have to listen to my voice twice in one day. So, pretty much this chapter just goes over the few things that are listed here: the history and growth of psychology, and whether it's a science or not, and do human traits develop through experience, nurture, or are we born with them, nature, the different biopsychosocial levels of analysis, and also psychology subfields, and applying the SQ3R code. Also, I want you to think about the nature versus nurture debate. How much of my identity, my trait, my moods, and my behavior is influenced by my genes? How much of these are produced by conditioning or by other experiences? So, as we go on to talk about nature versus nurture next time, I want you to be thinking about that and how does culture, school, family, and etc. influence your experiences? All right, so starting out with modern from when psychology started to modern psychology. So first off, Aristotle was the one that first came up with the idea that psychology is a relationship between the body and the psyche. And when they say psyche, they mean the mind. And he also said his way of answering those questions was to observe and to make guesses. Obviously, people, and the next psychologist we're going to look at is William Wundt. But before we talk about him, obviously people thought about natures of behavior and in the mind 2,000 years between Aristotle and William Wundt. However, in this class, we are mostly concerned with psychological thinkers and the ideas of the last 2 centuries. All right, moving on to Wilhelm. He added the key elements to help make psychology a science. He carefully measured observations, saying that they are detailed enough to measure the atoms of the mind, which is basic human processes, and experiments refer to the controlled activities allowing psychologists to study one atom mental processes well. Here's an experiment that he did in 1879 and pretty much was trying to develop the theory about when you push the button, does the ball drop based on when you heard the ball hit the platform, or do you push the button when you're consciously aware of hearing the ball hit the platform? So he just measured the time it took people to push the button. So do you think pushing a button is just an illusion of choice that happens after the fact? However, the real issue is that the delay is caused by the time it takes, however small, to consciously form an idea that a sound has been heard. Still, you can use this to highlight the limited value of introspection, which we're going to talk about next. All right, Edward Titchener came up with the idea of structuralism, and his teacher was Wilhelm Wundt. And he said that he relied on the self to report the data from the introspection, and pretty much introspection relates to the experience like touch and smell, whether it's a flower or anything really. And from that he got the idea of structuralism. Unfortunately, Titchener's structuralism was built on unreliable data that might not generalize to all people, and he couldn't build the whole mind from these parts. So structuralism wasn't really something in psychology that is feasible, or there's no data to back it up. All right, another psychology guy is William James, who developed functionalism. The functionalist approach closely relates to evolutionary thinking and sometimes presented as the evolutionary approach. Will come up many times in the text. Some examples of this: anxiety may have helped ancestors avoid dangers and plan to prevent future dangers. Getting conditioned to phobia, avoid food after one experience is good for not getting poisoned. So for example, like your ancestors, if they ate some poison berries and got sick, then it was a learned behavior that they will have a phobia towards that food because they've gotten sick off of it once. Um, William James also spent 12 years writing Principles of Psychology, a summary of the new science, which was from 1890, and some of his ideas are still used. All right, another pioneer was one of his students, and Mary Whiton Calkins. She studied with William James, but was denied a Harvard PhD because of her gender. She declined a degree offered by Radcliffe College, and she taught at Wesleyan College from 1891 to 1929. And then you see her APA. APA stands for American Psychological Association. The Experimental Psychology Organization was similar in mission to today's Association for Psychological Science. And then here you see because of her gender. All right, another female psychologist, Margaret Floy Washburn. She was the second female APA president and wrote The Animal Mind. She also studied with Edward Titchener, but she was not allowed to participate in his experimental psychology organization. Reason why? What do you think? Again, because of her gender. All right. Here's just some bubbles on some different definitions of psychology. We will talk about those more later on when we study the learning. All right, now on to the perspectives of psychology. You're going to make sure you write down or definitely take notes on these because you're going to need these for another activity that we're doing tomorrow. So again, pay close attention and write down. One perspective of psychology. When we say perspectives of psychology, it talks about specific viewpoints for examining and understanding behavior and mental processes. So the first one we're going to talk about behaviorism. John B. Watson and B.F. Skinner are famous, well-known behaviorists, and here it talks about their experiments that they did. The behavioral perspective emphasizes observable actions that can be measured. Okay, so it's observable behavior. Next one is the psychoanalytic psychology, Sigmund Freud. This focuses on unconscious drives, hidden desires, and conflicts that influence our behavior. So almost like our id, ego, superego, if you ever heard of that before. When they say unconscious drives, that can be sleep and things that are emphasized and you might really not know that you're doing it, or it's like childhood experiences, something that you do in your childhood that you that comes out later in life. Next one, humanism. Like I said, another famous humanistic psychologists, Abraham Maslow and Carl Rogers. They are the humanistic perspective suggests that people are basically good and that they strive to reach their full potential. If you ever heard of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, it's like a pyramid, and the first need's like to satisfy hunger, and then next is be safe, and you have to satisfy all these needs before you reach self-actualization. Okay. A few of them that I don't have a slide for, I forgot to put the slide in, so I apologize for that, is biological, evolutionary, sociocultural, and cognitive. And I will talk about those in that order. The biological perspective, it focuses on how the brain and body enable us to have emotions, memories, and sensory experiences. So again, that comes from the brain and the body. And evolutionary psychology, the evolutionary perspective suggests that the natural selection of traits promote the survival of the genes that help people adapt best to their situations and therefore survive. So pretty much we survive best because of our ancestors, and we've learned from the genes have carried on from their generation, and that's, how we are able to survive. Next is a social cultural perspective, and this view looks at how behavior and thinking across cultures and situations are alike and different. So exactly just how it sounds, you're comparing different cultures and how they relate to one another and don't. And the last perspective is a cognitive perspective. The cognitive perspective focuses on how we encode information, remember it, and use it to think, reason, and solve problems. So again, that kind of connects to um, biological, just in the way like how we think. Biological is like how your brain and body works. Cognitive is how you think and how you use it. That is the end of our session for tonight. And like I said, this is my first time, so I promise they will get better and sound better as time goes on. Thank you.